Yeah, and I think what you're doing is so important too, to be adaptable. I think honestly, like that's even something for me that I have to get better at as well when it comes to things. It's very hard, especially like it's like you're teaching an old dog new tricks, right? Like you've been doing this for so long, and it can be hard to like make that pivot, especially once you've already built the specific systems in place to keep the status quo of what you've already been doing.
Yeah, it's been really hard for me. And I've been really honest about that on YouTube. I'm like, guys, this is hard because I am like 6 years into YouTube and doing it one certain way. And now I'm trying to change like after I hit 100,000 subscribers. So it's been really hard, but I also know it's very important. And so I'm okay if it's a little bumpy for a minute to know that I come out the other end understanding like what I need to do.
Hello. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the Videocraft Show presented by Video Husky. I am your host, John Santiago. And in case you were new around here, every week I interview content creators about their stories, strategies, and experiences of building an online audience through video. Now, when it comes to building an online audience, particularly through YouTube, growth isn't always guaranteed. Even if you're consistent, there are many times throughout the journey where you'll hit a plateau. So what do you do when that happens? Our guest on this week's episode of the Videocraft Show presented by Video Husky has some thoughts. Jessica Stansberry is a solopreneur and content creator based in North Carolina with over 100,000 subscribers on YouTube, closing in actually at the time of this interview to 120,000 subscribers. She's made a comfortable living by sharing her knowledge with people about digital marketing, project management, and sales automation. Now, in spite of her success, Jessica finds herself in the predicament we described above. But she's not just sitting around hoping and waiting for the YouTube algorithms to change in her favor. Instead, Jessica's experimenting with new approaches to her content to re-engage her audience. In this episode, Jessica talks with me about what those strategies are. We also discuss where her path to running her own business started and how she pivoted into infopreneurship and content creation, the value of injecting your personality into your videos and why that can keep viewers coming back to your channel, and what trend hacking is and why it's a valuable tactic for growing your audience on YouTube. We talk about those things and so much more on this episode of the Videocraft Show presented by Video Husky. But before we toss to it, I want to remind everybody, if you are watching the conversation here on YouTube, make sure to hit the like button and leave a comment to let us know what you thought about this particular episode and what you learned. We always like to hear from you. So with that said, let's go ahead and toss it to my conversation with Jessica Stansberry. Jessica, it's awesome to have you on the Videocraft Show presented by Video Husky. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no, it's great. You know, we were chatting before we started, and obviously we have like a lot of mutual connections here. Three or four previous podcast guests, a future podcast guest to come. Actually, we all kind of know each other. So it's really fun to like connect, even for me working with Video Husky, to connect with like the YouTuber and content creator community. So it's nice to meet you and, you know, chat with you on this episode.
Yeah, same. It is really funny. Like I say all the time how small this world is. Like you don't realize it because you're like, oh, everybody who works on the internet or everybody who's a YouTuber or whatever. But honestly, most people know each other, or at least have heard of each other, right, or whatever.
Yeah, it's weird, right? Like, you know, you've grown an audience to 100,000 subscribers. A lot of the other people that we know, like Desiree Martinez, Owen Hemzat, Tim Schmoyer, they have also audiences in the thousands. And, you know, from that perspective, you're reaching a large amount of people. The audiences are big, but then when it comes to the people who are actually creating the content for those audiences, it's still such a small number.
It really is.
Yes, for sure. So I always like to start, you know, a lot of these conversations that I have with creators, it's just about their story of how they got to where they are today. And, you know, in doing research for this conversation, it was interesting to me that, you know, you had a corporate career before you actually went into eventually web design, which I want to talk to you about a little bit later in this conversation. But kind of walk me through where you were. Like, where was your mind mentally at that time? When you were mulling over the possibility of leaving your corporate career, and what exactly were you doing too?
Yeah. So to call it a corporate career is probably like, giving it a little too much credit, if you will. So I graduated college and at the time was working part-time for a marketing department in a company here locally. And I live in a very, very small town. If you consume any bit of my content, I talk about this all the time. I live in like Nowhereville, USA, like super small southern town. And here there's only about 3 to 4 really good companies to work for if you go into that corporate space. And by really good, I mean pay, benefits, that kind of thing.
Right.
And so I was working for one of those part-time in college. And as soon as I graduated, they actually had a full-time opening in customer service. I jumped on it because that was, it was a company that was notorious for letting people move up through the ladder. So I was like, that's fine. It's a good entry-level position. Whatever. Well, I stayed there for 3 years and never moved anywhere until I just pieced out,
I can totally relate to that. My first job out of college was like that too. I worked at a radio station and I got more responsibilities, but like as far as like upward mobility and stuff, I was never really getting raises.
No. And I was in customer service. I hate customer service. Like that is not like it's not where I'm best utilized either, right? Like I'm the first person to jump all over a customer if they jump on me first, like I was like constantly in trouble because some customer would yell at me and then I'd yell back and they'd be like, oh, you're not supposed to yell at them. Well, he yelled at me. Tell him not to yell at me and we won't yell at him. I just hated the job. I hated it so very much. It was just a soul sucking job for sure. And I really saw no future potential for possibly moving up, which was kind of my goal when I got the job to begin with. And I was young. I mean, I worked there from 21 to 24, just out of college up till 24. And when I had my first son at 24 is when I was like, to go to a job that I hate, that is absolutely literally crushing my soul while someone else takes care of my baby during the day doesn't sound like something I want to do. So we kind of, rearranged our finances. We were for sure not in a financial place to be able to do it, but I quit that job and went home to stay home with my baby. And out of need for money is how my business started. So like we couldn't afford to be like a one income family. And so out of necessity is when I was like, okay, I'm going to do something, I'm going to do something to make me money. And that something started off as graphic design because in college, my degree is in advertising with a communication, concentration in advertising with a focus on design. Gotcha. There we go. It was like a really long, like weird degree. And so I had all this design background and I was like, oh, I can do some stuff, and that turned into web design, which just kind of trickled down from there.
Yeah. So then, so it seems like them making that pivot over to web design, it wasn't like something that was totally like new for you because you had the background in it. You had the experience from college, but at the same time, then going from like working for a company in which, you're guaranteed a paycheck to then like having to hustle and like find clients for yourself. How was that transition for you? Like what were there resources that you turned to? I imagine like when you started out, like you're probably just looking on Google or something like that, or even YouTube at the time. The ecosystem back then was was much smaller than it is now, but just looking for information on like, how can I actually make this transition work?
Oh yeah, it was not that well researched at all. I was just like, I'm going home, I'll figure it out. And like you say, I had a little bit of experience from college as far as like the web designer design spectrum goes. But in college, we were designing websites with Dreamweaver because, college is still like, I'd say a decade behind what the actual world is. Right. Like advertising, I went and spoke at my alma mater at like one of their entrepreneurship summits or something just a couple years ago, like pre-COVID. And they were still not teaching digital marketing in their marketing department.
Wow.
Like, I'm like, who's making these decisions, So anyway, I learned Dreamweaver. And so I had the skills, but I didn't have the skills because I went into designing websites using WordPress. So it was very different. But no, I mean, I didn't have any guidance. There weren't really a lot of like online courses or things like that back then. This was 2010. So it was a lot of Google. A lot of Google and a lot of just like figuring it out on my own.
So was there anybody though, like that came to mind as far as like, I mean, was like somebody like Pat Flynn, for example, was he already around back then or was he not? He hadn't even started yet, I think.
I don't remember him back then.
Yeah.
He could have started and I just didn't know about that world yet because I do feel like I had a little bit of a disconnect when I first started till when I figured out there was like actually people doing this, but I don't remember Pat back then at all.
Gotcha. So then how did you discover that world? Because then eventually, like after, a few years of doing the service-based business for yourself, and, you were very frank on your website too, that you weren't making that much money from it either, like about $10,000 a year. And,
yeah.
And so like, going from that and then switching over to essentially like infopreneurship, that's a term that I've heard you use on like your podcast, content creation, like what was that transition like for you?
That is my favorite transition because it was scary, but also I had way more resources than I had in the beginning of like the business as a whole. So what happened for me then was I was just head down hustling, just trying to make money to get by with my web design business. And a lot of the reason we were so strapped was because we had a mortgage payment that was pretty high. We had built a brand new house right out of college and, all this stuff.
Right.
And in 2014, late 2014, we sold that house and downsized and got a much less mortgage payment, much less house, but much less mortgage payment. And it allowed me to kind of take about a month to restructure everything, to raise my prices, to, take some time off to be able to move forward a little bit better than I had been doing. And during that month, I stumbled into a Facebook group full of female entrepreneurs, and who knows how. I still to this day don't really know how I did that. Like, I don't know. Is a God thing, right?
Yeah.
And so I stumble into this Facebook group, and it's got thousands and thousands of female entrepreneurs in it. And I'm like, oh, like this is a thing. Like there's a community. It's like, okay, I can handle this. And that was about the time. So 2015 was about the time when people were starting to do this, right? People were starting to be content creators. People were starting to teach for a living. And so I just kind of followed suit. Once I was exposed to that world, I kind of followed suit and saw people that I admired and purchased courses and joined programs and went to conferences to be able to do this. And in 2016, I made the switch completely. So in 2016, about mid-year, I offboarded my last web design client and went full force on infopreneurship.
Now tell me about the decision there when you felt like, okay, this feels right. Like I can comfortably leave web design and just transition to this full time. Because I imagine, I'm sure people, that you work with, you coach, you consult, they ask you this all the time as well, where it's like, when can I actually leave? Like, how did you know for yourself that, hey, this is the time I can make it work, and there's not that much concern on my end as far as like what the possible outcome might be.
Right. So for me, if it would have been up to me, I would have probably stayed doing both for about another year. Because again, it never feels like the right time, right? It never feels like you are at the point where you can do the thing. And I think that's part of what's really hard about entrepreneurship in general, or anything in general, is that it never is the right time. Like there's never a right time. You always just have to make a jump in some way, shape, or form. But for me, what happened was I had knew that eventually I would decrease clients, increase course sales, or whatever that looked like. And I had been doing that up until that point for about 9 months. I had my first successful course launch about 9 months before I completely shut down the web design side. And it was a struggle, right? Like I didn't have time to focus on the content side or the web or the teaching side because I had to deal with my clients, my whole goal was I was going to gradually increase or decrease the amount of clients I took on and gradually increase how many times I sold a course or how many webinars I did per month or whatever to even it out to where I could make that switch. But I went to a conference in late 2016 and had a conversation with one of the, like my peers there. And she was like, Jessica, you can do this. Like there's people who, you know, thought you were speaking at this conference already and you've only been on the scene for like 6 months. And I wasn't speaking. I had so many people who were coming up to me like, well, what are you talking about? And I'm like, I'm not speaking. I'm just an attendee. But I think it was because I had been so visible in the communities and on YouTube. I had started on YouTube at this point, had a podcast. And she was like, you can do this. Like, you can do it. And you're a hustler. So you're going to make it work, you know? And I'm afraid if you sit here and ride the fence, you'll constantly feel safe and you'll never make that transition. And that conversation is literally, I was like, all right, the web design clients I have now are it. I'm done after this. And so, yeah, that's basically what I did. I jumped, but I had enough confidence in myself and my skills because I had been doing it pretty successfully for, I don't know, 9 or 10 months at that point, that I could do it and that I knew if I felt the pressure that I would do it.
Yes. Gotcha. So in those 9 to 10 months, was that a lot of like audience building for you, right? Like that you mentioned you had that's around the time that you started on YouTube too, right?
Yes.
And with your podcast. So a lot of that time was like setting the building blocks or like the foundational blocks in terms of like building the audience that you could eventually then sell your courses, your products to.
Yep, it was for sure. I technically launched my first course in December of 2015 and I sold 0.
Wow.
Because I didn't have an audience. I don't know why I thought I could just sell to nobody, but I did. And so I was like, okay. So the next like 4 months I spent really audience building. And that's when I launched that second course that actually sold some. But yes, that's also the time I started YouTube. Our podcast had really grown. We got some big guests and was able to like, you know, really get this out there. And I was doing everything I possibly could to grow my audience during that time. So joint venture podcasts, you know, interviews like this one, joint venture webinars, being a guest on other people's YouTube channels, being, you know, guest blogging. Like I was doing everything you possibly could think of to build that audience. And funny enough, I talked about this today with somebody else, but that was also the time when Periscope was a thing.
Oh,
do you remember
yes.
Periscope?
Yeah, on Twitter.
Yes, but it wasn't Twitter's at the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it was just, you could just go live on Periscope, but there was nowhere else offering live video. Facebook didn't offer it yet. And so I actually was able to build a pretty decent sized audience on Periscope, which then I was able to transfer over, you know, into my email list and things like that. Thankfully, because Facebook Live killed Periscope just a few months later.
Yeah.
But that was, I mean, I went literally balls to the wall to build this audience, you know, and because I knew that was the goal and I knew I needed people there to purchase from me or I wasn't going to be able to do it.
Yeah. How did you manage your time, like to be able to do all of those things, balance all of those things? Because like, for example, to get on podcasts, you know, collaborate with YouTubers and stuff like that, I imagine that you're doing quite a bit of outreach. You know, like you're sending emails, you're probably maybe like DMing people on Instagram or at that time. I mean, just talk to me about that, like that element of having to, you know, being able to juggle all of that and do it in such an effective and really like efficient manner.
Yeah, I didn't do it well at all. I do much better now than I did then. But around this time, my oldest son was in kindergarten and my youngest was still home with me. Yeah. And we couldn't afford daycare. Like at first, we could not afford to put him in daycare. So I had 2 days a week during this time that was child free because of my dad's schedule. So he would get my youngest son for me 2 days a week. And that really wasn't even super consistent because of, you know, different things. So it was a hot mess there for a while because I knew I needed to do this, but I also had a young child at home, like a 3-year-old, 2-year-old at home, and had to go pick up, you know, my oldest one from school and like all of this stuff. So there was a lot of late nights worked. And honestly, from the time I started my business through about late 2016, when I was able to afford to put my youngest son in some childcare, I worked a lot of late nights because it's just what I could do. And I embraced it. I don't recommend it to anybody because it's awful and I burnt out and it was, whatever. But it afforded me the ability to not have to do any of that now, you know? And I worked things around like Periscope. I always did my Periscope lives in the car line waiting to pick up my kindergartner. So like things like that is what we did. And I had a podcast at the time. So those 2 days a week without my youngest son were fully dedicated to podcasting. And so one day was dedicated to us interviewing guests and the other day was dedicated to me being on people's podcasts. And so, yeah, I mean, I just worked with it until I could do little things to get it a little bit better. But I would say it was probably early 2017 before I was really like, okay, I only work during these times and this is the day for this and this is the day for that. And now everything is much more streamlined. I mean, I only take calls on Tuesdays. I will not do a call another day. I, film on a certain day. I do this thing on a certain day. So everything is much more streamlined now. And I don't hardly ever have to work once my kids get home from school. So yeah, but back then it was a mess. Yeah. It was a hot mess.
Yeah. It really sounds like, you're batching a lot of your time and finding like you were able to find a lot of these like pockets, right? Where you could, you could like squeeze in a live or something like that. I think that's, those pockets, right? I feel like, I mean, I'm not great at this myself. It's where you end up filling it just like scrolling through your Instagram feed when you could actually be doing something more effective, right? Like, and it seems like that's what you were able to do.
I was, like I say, it was kind of out of necessity. I didn't have a choice, and it was nap times were dedicated to this and like whatever. And I just made it work. Again, it wasn't done well and it was very, very stressful for a few years, but it worked.
Yeah. Yeah. Those constraints, I always find that constraints can actually help you if you like embrace them, like even for the random example of like packing something. If you have a big suitcase that you're going to take on a trip, you're going to probably want to fill it to the brim, right? Whereas if you maybe like just bring a small backpack or a smaller like rolling luggage, then you're not going to end up overpacking stuff. So
yeah,
those constraints can help.
Sometimes. Yeah, for sure. And I think sometimes having a bit of necessity, like knowing that you have to do this or you're going to have to go get a real job, because that's where I was, right? Like my oldest son was in kindergarten. My youngest son was about 3. And we were looking at, well, when he goes to preschool next year, I'm going to have to get a job because I'm not making enough money to, justify being home, and that fire under my butt plus the fire under my butt originally when I was like, I'm quitting my job. I have to figure out a way to make money. I think that was like one of the best things I ever did. Not that I recommend people quitting or doing anything without a plan, but I knew myself and I knew that if I was under those, constraints and I was under those pressures that I would do what it took to get where I needed to be. So my husband is actually quitting his job. His last day is at the end of September. He's someone who's always really liked security and things like that. So it's a very new thing.
Yeah.
But
what does he do right now?
Yeah. So right now he is a building inspector and the fire marshal for our county.
Gotcha.
He's done that since we got out of college. So about 13, 14 years. But he is going to be starting his own business using his expertise to consult and just some different services. But I told him he doesn't need to make money, right? Like we would be okay if he didn't make any money. And I told him the other day, I was like, I feel like we have to light a fire under there somehow or another. Like, I feel like you have to have that motivation of I have to make a certain amount of money a month to really get where you want to go, know? And because I've seen friends of mine even who, maybe their spouse made enough money or they had a big savings account or like whatever, who weren't financially pressed at all to make their business succeed. And they have grown a lot slower than I have. And so I think a lot of that is because I was very like, well, I have to do this. Like there's not another option. Yeah. So I don't know. It was hard, but I'm very appreciative of it.
Yeah. I wonder too, like in terms of like balancing that also with like the idea of being patient. Cause like there's a lot of times where like, you know, you can be impatient with action, but then like the results, you know, don't necessarily come. Like you can literally be doing everything that you can as far as, you know, promoting yourself, all of this, but like you're not necessarily seeing the fruits of your labor actually happen for yourself. So like how did you deal with moments like that where you were like grinding and then, you know, you're not necessarily seeing things pan out right away?
So I will say, and this is the advice I give to anybody who kind of feels that way, is odds are you're not actually doing things that are going to make a difference. You're just doing what you think you should be doing. And so I always tell people, and what I did back then was to focus on money-making tasks first, always. And so, yes, I might have been hustling, but if I was like needing to make the money, I was hustling to get back in touch with people who had contacted me before about web design, or to, you know, oh, that person had asked me to be on their podcast. I should probably go ahead and reply back to them. Or, you know, oh, I have 10 friends who have podcasts that I've never been on. Let me go do that because I know that's going to grow my audience. So for me, I never felt that way, to be honest, because I was always focused on things that would make me money, not growing my Instagram following or, you know, even YouTube. YouTube was a holding place for videos that were on my blog for about the first year that I did it.
Right.
And so I was never focused on like vanity metrics or numbers that didn't matter. I was very much so, if I had 3 hours, 2.5 of those hours better be focused on something that's going to get me money pretty quickly. And so that's what I always did. So I was creating courses. I was, you know, launching those courses, having webinars, things like that in the time I had given, rather than trying to grow a following or whatever. I was hustling to get the audience I needed, selling to them, hustling to get the audience I needed, selling to them. And so I never felt that way. I never felt like I was hustling to the point where it didn't matter, because I was never focusing on things that weren't going to make me money pretty quickly.
Gotcha. That makes a lot of sense. Now, in terms of your YouTube channel, as you kind of touched on there, like the early days of it, you were essentially, it was kind of like running on autopilot for you for the most part. It was kind of running in the background. But tell me about the moments where you started to notice that it was like gaining traction, and it was like, it caught your attention and you're thinking to yourself, I probably should maybe like allocate more resources to this platform.
I can tell you the exact moment. So I had a Facebook group at the time that had about 2,000 or 3,000 people in it, and that I had been growing for a couple of years. And I started putting up videos in like the spring of 2016. And this would have been mid-year, so June of 2017. And again, I was just filming videos to match my blog post, embedding them in the blog post for the good SEO juju from Google, and going on about my day. I didn't even care what the title of them was in YouTube or the thumbnail or like anything, right? And in June of 2017, I just, you know, was on a spree of checking my analytics everywhere. So I was like checking my Google analytics and checking this and podcast analytics, and I checked YouTube, and I had 500 subscribers and had never done anything to get any of them. I was like, well, that's interesting. I've never tried to get subscribers here, but cool. I wonder what would happen if I tried. And that's what I did. And so it grew exponentially from there. So that was June, like a few weeks after I made the decision to really focus on YouTube. I saw a post from Tim Schmoyer, who was hosting, I believe his first like in-person Video Labs mastermind type weekend. And it was like $3,000. I didn't have $3,000 at the time. I mean, at least to spend on that. I mean, I had it, but not to spend on that. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to apply because I know this would be good for me. You know, like I've made this decision. YouTube's going to be a thing for me. And I made that decision in June, got accepted to go to that. That was in September. And from June to September, I grew from 500 to like 1,800 follower or subscribers, because again, I actually started trying. And then in September, I went to that thing with Tim and, you know, changed even more things with my strategy. and continued to grow from there. Within the next year, I had about 30,000 subscribers.
Wow. So what were some of the big takeaways from that experience with Tim that really like helped spur your growth?
Yeah. So to be honest, thankfully I was doing a lot right. It was funny because we went around the table at that and like we're peer reviewing each other's channels. And I mean, everybody was like, I love your videos, whatever. But the biggest thing that I took away was that I was, again, treating it as part of my business model, right? And so every video was trying to grow my email list. So in every single video, I was like, go to whatever.com and subscribe to get this free checklist or to get this thing. And Tim was the first one to be like, hey, no, because YouTube doesn't want you sending people off the platform. And you are sending people off the platform in every single video. It's obviously not hurting you too much. You're growing, but I guarantee if you stop doing that, you would grow more. And I did. I would say that's probably the biggest thing I started doing once I left there was, not trying to grow my email list with every video, trying to kind of space that out. And now I approach it with like a formulaic approach, but that drastically helped because within a month or so of doing that, I started seeing my analytics trending even further upward.
Wow. So what is that formulaic approach now that when it comes to like including specific calls to action to like marketing materials to drive people to your community, to drive people to your courses so that you're not obviously like oversaturating the space and like allowing people to stay on YouTube, which obviously YouTube prefers?
Yeah. So I always tell people my rule there, and somebody else's rule may be different, but my rule is an 80-20 rule, and it's an 80-20 rule regardless of what platform I'm on. So this is Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, whatever. But YouTube is very important because they are very much so like, leave people here, stop sending people away. But it's an 80-20 rule. So I like to say 80% of the time, I am just nurturing that audience. I am getting them to take calls to action that happen within the platform. So commenting, subscribing, liking, sharing, like anything like that. And then 20% of the time, I am actually asking for something from them. And during that 80% of the time, you can have soft asks. So you can have things in the description that go with the video, but maybe you didn't tell them verbally on the video to go down there and check it out. Because the amount of people who are going to do that is way, way, way less because, how many of us check a description of a video,
Exactly.
And so it's way less, but you're still growing your list or whatever the goal is there because there are people who will do it.
Yeah.
But the 20% of the time you are actually verbally, physically sending them somewhere else. And so, that looks like if you're doing 10 videos, 8 out of 10 times you don't promote anything and 2 out of 10 times you do. And so that's kind of the formula I stick to. About once every 4 to 5 videos, I will actually promote something that requires a click away from the platform.
Gotcha. Okay. Wow. That makes sense. I think maybe we should start trying that here with the Videocraft show. That's the thing. That's the thing I love about doing this show. Sometimes, honestly, it's like free advice for me, even though I'm, working in marketing here. I'm like, maybe I could apply a lot of the things that I learned from people like you as a guest. I think that's one of the real benefits of actually having a podcast is just being able to connect with people like yourself to, pick your brain and get knowledge and also share it with our audience too.
I agree. So I was on the Social Media Examiner podcast a few months ago, and that right there is what we spent the entire episode talking about, was this, formulaic approach to actually using YouTube as a business. Because it's funny, a lot of the people who teach YouTube are YouTubers. Yeah. They're teaching it for YouTube. And yes, I want to be a YouTuber, but I also have a business I'm trying to grow over here. And so it's like, what is that magic number? And so I did a lot of testing. Like once I left that experience with Tim and got that advice, I did a lot of testing around what that looked like for me and what felt natural, but also what worked and what didn't, tick off the YouTube gods. Yeah. And so that's what I came up with, was like an 80-20 situation.
Yeah. Do you think that's given you an advantage, right? That you started out essentially as a business person first who was creating content. And now you're obviously, you are a creator, but there are a lot of people who go into YouTube initially, or even now TikTok, with the idea of like, yeah, I just want to have like a lot of followers or a lot of fans and stuff, because I think I can make money that way. Whereas again, like your point of view and your perspective is a more entrepreneurial approach. And so I'm wondering if you feel like that's given you a bit more of an advantage versus say like other people that you've worked with who are like approaching it from that, like, I just want to have a lot of people to influence type of perspective.
Yeah, I think it depends on what we're talking about. So yes and no. Absolutely yes, because even when my YouTube channel was small, like we're talking under 10,000 followers on YouTube, subscribers on YouTube, I could still like attribute a huge chunk of my income to the fact that they were coming from YouTube. I believe I had less than 20,000 subscribers on YouTube when I hit my first 6-figure year in my business. And YouTube was a massive factor in that, even though it wasn't YouTube paying me the money. So in that way, absolutely. I was able to see that YouTube could be a platform that could grow my business and could assist in my goals and help me build an audience without being so distracted by like, oh, YouTube AdSense or getting a certain number of subscribers. Cause I didn't care about that for the most part. I just wanted it to grow. But if you're looking at succeeding on the platform long term, I think it's actually hurt me. So when we're talking about YouTube as a whole, if my whole strategy up until this year really has been search, right? And doing anything I can to pair the right keywords with a video from me that can get me found in search, to get me new people, to get them down the rabbit hole, right? And that has grown my channel. However, if you look at someone who has 100,000 followers or subscribers, and I have 100,000 subscribers, and they have always focused on community building and doing videos that maybe didn't show up in search, but that their audience loved, you can see a big difference in the amount of people that watch each one of their videos versus the amount of people that watch each one of mine. And now I don't care too much about that because it's still doing the purpose that I put it out there for. But when you look at growing long term on YouTube and being able to sustain the YouTube, income or AdSense income that I've been used to, I have had to really like teach an old dog new tricks here, because what got me here won't get me there. And I've really had to realize that I need to create a community around my channel rather than just using it as a big search engine that people then, use. And so that's the last, I'd say 8 or 9 months, I've really been focusing on that, like mixing in search with community building content to try and turn that around a little bit. So I'd say, yes, it helped. And also it hurt.
Yeah. I'm curious too, about the, that idea of creating community building content. Now, is this where you are essentially like looking to your comments for ideas of what people are talking about to you, or is it also like looking up other videos from people who are also in your niche and kind of like piggybacking off of what they've done to try and perhaps capture their audience too? What does that look like?
Yeah, so it's a lot of things all combined. So for sure, it's definitely like pulling in your audience to help you decide what kind of content you're going to do. Or, I call it trend hacking when you go see what works with someone else and you do a similar thing. But really what it comes down to is creating content that they will come back for, even if they don't care about the actual topic. So creating a community that loves you so much and loves your content and the way you speak about things that will make them come back and watch every one of your videos, regardless of whether or not they care, So for instance, for me, I really love to watch Sarah Dietschy's channel. I don't even give a flying fart about half the stuff she talks about, but I just like her as a person. Yeah. And, she will talk about all these like weird, PCs and like Samsung phones. And I am an Apple girl to the grave. Like I will not ever, forsake my Macs. But But like, she will talk about things I don't care about, but I still watch the videos because she has made me want to. Because, and here's the key, she integrates community building content and personal content into her tutorial type videos or her reviews or whatever. And that's really where you see this like magical thing happen, is when you're not like a talking head, like, hi, I'm going to give you 5 tips on how to whatever, you know, and you're not just like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You are giving personal experiences or integrating personal stories. That's when people come back. And so that's really what I mean by community building, is creating a community, creating an atmosphere and cultivating people who want to come back for everything you do, regardless of whether or not they care about the actual topic, because they know they're going to get some fun or they're going to get something along the way.
Wow. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense to me. So it's a lot of like storytelling, you know, and incorporating like personal parts of yourself. Like I've noticed that when I've seen some of your videos, you know, the talking head style videos, that it really does seem like you're just kind of talking off the cuff. Like you're, you know,
I do
that you're just literally like talking to a friend or something like that. Do you script or have an outline at all for those? Or is it just literally, I have the topic and now I'm just going to riff here, like freestyle?
Yeah. It's a lot. It's a mixture of riffing and outlining. So I definitely don't script, because if I script something, it's awful because I'm such an off the cuff person. Like I am much better if somebody just throws questions at me, or if I am just given a topic and can talk about it. I actually, like when I speak on stage, I know a general outline, but I never practice my speeches. When I'm being interviewed on podcasts, you could send me questions you're going to ask me all day, but I won't look at them.
Yeah.
Because I am better. Like I'm an expert in what I do, and I wouldn't go on a podcast and pretend like I wasn't, you know, or pretend like I was when I wasn't. And so there shouldn't be any questions you throw my way that I wouldn't know an answer to. So I'm just better that way. And I've learned that about myself. And so as far as videos go, I do not script them because it would be awful. I'm just not good with a script.
Yeah.
But what I do is I come up with the topic. I definitely plan out my topics and keywords and things like that. And then I come up with generally a bullet list of what I'm thinking about talking about in that video. Hopefully in some kind of order so it makes sense in my head and comes out okay, you know, when I'm doing it. But then I just work off that bullet list. So that way I'm not forgetting anything I wanted to talk about, but I can also add in anything in between.
Gotcha. It's just like one page, essentially. It's not even like multiple
It's not even a page.
It's literally like half a page or something, like a quarter of a page or whatever.
Not even. Yeah. A quarter of a page is probably
like
the best
Post-it
measurement. Yes. Because I use ClickUp. Yeah. I don't know if you've heard of ClickUp, but I use ClickUp, and each card has like a description section, and that would probably be like the viewable part of it is probably equivalent to like half of a Google Doc. And I hardly ever fill that up. Wow. So it's usually like just some bullet points and just some things I need to make sure I talk about. And then I go from there, and I either have that pulled up on my phone or I have it pulled up on my computer, and my camera is like really close to my computer.
Gotcha. Speaking of tools like ClickUp, are there any other like essential tools to your own like content creation stack that you just couldn't live without, that really like help streamline the process for you?
Yes. ClickUp would be number one, hands down. I used to be a Trello girl, but a couple of years ago, I guess, it was definitely pre-COVID. I switched to, I love how everything's like pre or post-COVID. It was pre-COVID.
Yeah, it's like it's like AD and BC, right? Like that time frame.
Really is.
You know, before like Christ, after Christ.
Before flipping 2020. But I switched to ClickUp because it has way more capabilities, and I have a team, and the team capabilities were better. ClickUp would be hands down my number one tool, I would say, because everything has a place, and we have calendar views where we can plan things out, and the podcast gets planned in one section and the YouTube in another, and it just works. But the other two that I would say that I fall back on every time, one is TubeBuddy, to really, you know, research. The main thing with that one for me, and there's a million things you could do with it, but the main thing for me is researching keywords and researching things I want to rank for, or researching what other people do, you know, and that's the main tools I use there. But the third thing, and, you know, a really big tool that I use every single day is Keywords Everywhere. Yes. So Yes.
Love keywords everywhere.
I love it so much.
I use that also for like not only just YouTube, but also just like regular SEO, right? Like
Same.
It's great.
Yes. It's, I've always loved SEO. I've always loved like to nerd out around it, but to like go into Google keyword research tool or whatever the flip they call it is the most ridiculous experience you will ever have,
Yep.
And so keywords everywhere, being able to see how many searches per month, what the competition is, and really like do some research there. That is like a top tool I couldn't live without. And it's basically free. It's not free anymore, but it's basically free because it's really cheap.
Yeah. It's only, I think you could get like for $10 or something, like thousands of like free search queries or something for
it.
I'm thinking,
isn't it like 1 million or like 100,000? It's
something
a lot.
like that. Yeah. And then I don't know if have you ever heard or used like Ahrefs? Ahrefs is kind of like a step above keywords everywhere.
I don't think so.
Can provide a lot of the same type of information. And they do have like search information for YouTube as well. But that's also like a good one for like looking up keywords and stuff like that.
Yeah. I'm here for a tool. Any kind of tool that like, I don't know, helps me hack the system or make things better is always good with me.
Exactly. So planning all of this out, right? Like at this point right now, you are creating for your YouTube channel, focus on that specifically. You're creating essentially like one video per week. I know from I think it was your most recent video that you put out that you're hoping to potentially like ramp that up to like 2 at some point. But how do you go about like planning like when to publish and distribute the content for your channel, and then even going into creating it? How far ahead are you making things like that?
Yeah. Oh, that's such a good question. So first of all, I am going to go to 2 videos a week, and I have went through different phases in my YouTube career, basically based on how much help I have, because it's like, I can't physically do all this myself, I've done 3 videos a week. I've done 2. I've done 1. Like it just kind of depends. I've never done less than 1, so like I feel like that's winning.
You got to do at least 1.
We're going to do one video a week. That's all. So for the last like year or so, for the last couple years, I've only done 1, and we're looking at going up to 2 because I have more help in the editing atmosphere now. And so it's like, okay, we can make that happen. But for me, I just always do my video on the same day, right? Like they always release on Tuesdays. How that came about, I don't know. You'd have to ask 2016 Jessica why she put out her videos on Tuesdays. I would say, actually, I know exactly why. Because back then I was co-hosting a podcast, and we released episodes on Mondays and Wednesdays. And so if I was going to promote something, it couldn't be on Mondays or Wednesdays because then I was promoting too many things. So it went to a Tuesday, and here we are, 5 years later, still going on Tuesdays. So basically, as far as like why, I don't know. That's just the day I do it. Time-wise, though, I definitely use, YouTube's built-in tools and some other tools to help me decide what works best, but I also test that out. Like in the last like month or so, I bet I've released videos at multiple different times because I've been kind of testing out to see what works best for my audience. So I just kind of wing that part while also sticking to a really good schedule. Now, as far as how far ahead I am, this has changed drastically over the last few years. So if you would have asked me that 3 years ago, I would have said, I'm 3 months ahead. And here's what happened there. Okay. So I'm a batcher. Like I am like, let's get all of these videos done. Let's do it, and I had a really streamlined way to edit my videos worked out. And I had a team in place where, I would film all the videos. I'd get them to the team. They'd get them back to me. We'd upload them. And I was batch filming 15 videos in one day.
Wow.
On a regular basis.
Wow.
Yeah. Now they were much shorter than my videos are now. So now my videos are like 20 to 30 minutes long. And back then they were like 7 or 8. And so it's very, very different. But again, I'm focused more on community now than I am on search. And so that's a big difference there. But what happened was, there's 2 things. One, when you're batched that far ahead, I got disconnected from my content. Like I was excited about that video when I filmed it, but 7 weeks later, I'm like, woohoo, video film, yay, go awesome. Okay, I'm going to talk about it once and then go on about my day, because I wasn't attached to it, even though it was an exciting topic for me before.
Mm-hmm.
And I had moved on to the next month's videos at that point. So like the attachment just wasn't there. And if I'm not excited about a video, I can't promote it in a way where other people are going to be excited about it. And so I started to feel a disconnect there, but also we've talked about it already, the trend hacking, what's working for somebody else and being able to kind of ride that wave. You can't do that when you're batch 3 months out because YouTube's time sensitive. If I see this certain trend happening, like if I see that, and who knows who started it, right? But if I see that a bunch of people are doing videos on X topic and they're doing really well and it's my same ideal client or, viewer, then I need to be taking advantage of that traffic. And you can't do that when you have everything batched out for 3 months,
Right.
So it was the kind of a combination of those two things that made me stop doing that. And I would say now, and for the last 2 years, I'm generally batched 1 to 2 weeks ahead of time. So not very long at all, which can get you in trouble, if you get sick or something like that.
Yeah.
But it also is more beneficial in the long run for the actual growth on the platform. So I would rather know that I'm closer to my content and that I can hop on trends when I need to hop on them and have to miss a week because I got sick or because a kid got sick or because something happened I couldn't film, than know that I'm so far disconnected that everything doesn't work like it's supposed to.
Right. I'd love for you to expand even a little bit more, touched on this here and there on the idea of trend hacking, but I'm really curious about, is there a specific part of YouTube that you're looking at in terms of finding like trends and whatnot to piggyback off of?
Yeah. So it's like a combination of things. Okay. So one, I know based on my analytics, what channels my viewers are watching besides mine. So if you go into your analytics, you can see what channels people like your viewers are watching. And so I keep an eye on those channels. And if I see that, let's say we were talking about, Heather Torres from Think Media. If I see that Think Media did a video 2 weeks ago and it's about X and it just way outperformed their other videos, then how can I do a video with similar keywords or a similar subject, not copying them at all? And 99% of the time, like 99.9% of the time, I don't ever watch their videos. It's just that I know the general topic, but if I see that, then I'm going to be like, okay, how can I create something similar? How can I tap into these keywords? What can I do? What can I add to the subject? Because if I do that, if their video is taking off, YouTube is literally looking for content that's similar because there are viewers that like this video, obviously, and they need to show them more videos. So one, I just keep an eye on my quote unquote competitors. I don't believe in competition. Like we're all in this together. Like I really don't. I am good friends with Heather and Sean and Tim and like all of these people. And so I don't believe in it for 1 second. But I keep an eye on what YouTube would consider my competitors, right? And just kind of see. But then also, TubeBuddy also has like a trending tab that I will tap into. YouTube's built-in trending tab is junk, especially if you're not in those like top 5 categories of like news and fashion and whatever else. But the other thing, and this is a newer feature inside of just like YouTube Studio, and I can't remember off the top of my head exactly what part it's in, but I think it's in like the audience section of the analytics. They will show you what videos, like specific videos, other people are watching that are your viewers. So then it's not just channels, right? Then it's like, oh, I know this video from this person is being watched by my people. And if I can, again, create something similar or hit on that same topic or give my own spin to it, it's going to do really well. And I know it will because it's doing really well for them. So I kind of just keep a tab on it. There have been times I've let things pass because I just didn't have time to rearrange everything to do that. Right. But then there's times that I'm like, oh, you know what? I'm going to do this. For instance, the video I filmed today, 2 videos for the next 2 weeks. And I had already had on my calendar a couple of topics, but last night I was scrolling YouTube and just kind of scrolling my home feed. and a video came up. I have no clue who the creator was. I couldn't tell you right now. I have a screenshot of it somewhere. But all it said was what to do. It said, you know how I don't know if you've seen these videos on YouTube where people are like, I don't dream of labor. Like,
oh, yes. I've seen a lot of those videos, actually. That's like for the last few months. A lot of it too, like you and I are like the same age. I've noticed that it's a lot of like younger millennials or like Gen Zers.
Yes. And it's very much so been a trend, right?
Yeah.
And this girl was tapping into that trend, but she put a twist on it. So it was like, I don't dream of labor, but I don't have any money. And so basically this video was, in my eyes, was basically, how do you quit your job if you don't have any money? Mm-hmm. So I was like, and it had like, I don't know, it was published a week ago and had like 600,000 views, pretty small channel. Yeah. I'm like, all right. So my video for next week is how to quit your job, how to quit your job if you don't have money to quit. And I talk about the different things you can do to get money to be able to quit your job. And so knowing that like that video is taking off, it's got 600,000 views in a week on a fairly small channel, or what was a small channel, tells me that people are interested in that topic. And if I can do a spin on it, then I should do that. Again, I didn't even watch it. I just saw the title and the views and I was like, all right, let's go.
Yeah. And in that case, like, are you trying to incorporate like that keyword or that phrase still, or are you still just trying to make the content as relevant to the topic, right? Rather than trying to, again, like squeeze like the exact word verbiage of like, I don't dream of labor into like the title or the description of your video.
Yeah, it really just depends on the strategy for that video. So some videos, I don't care at all about the search. I'm like, you know what? Let's just make it all like community building, or give it a really flashy title and hope for the best, right? Mm-hmm. And then some videos I am trying to do the keywords pretty stringently in, but it also depends on what I think the purpose of the video is and where I think it'll thrive. If the video is going to thrive with keywords, then I should probably do that, you know? But if it's not, then let's get a little more creative with it. Like this one is, you know, nobody is searching how to quit my job with no money. Actually, they might be, but it's probably not a massive search, right? Yeah. And so I'm not going to specifically go after those key terms, because I know that the title being flashy and getting people's attention is more important than the SEO behind it. Whereas if I'm going to do, you know, a ClickUp tutorial, I probably should focus on keywords. So it just kind of depends on the video for me, but I am in this phase of my YouTube journey. I'm trying to focus more on community building and, you know, really tapping into emotions of people when they're wanting to watch a video, rather than just like the people who are going to search and searching for something and being their answer.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think what you're doing is so important too, to be adaptable. I think honestly, like that's even something for me that I have to get better at as well. When it comes to things, it's very hard, especially like it's like you're teaching an old dog new tricks, right? Like you've been doing this for so long, and it can be hard to like make that pivot, especially once you've already built the specific systems in place to like, to like keep the status quo of what you've already been doing.
Yeah, it's been really hard for me. And I've been really honest about that on YouTube. I'm like, guys, this is hard, because I am like, you know, 6 years into YouTube and, you know, doing it one certain way. And now I'm trying to change like after I hit 100,000 subscribers. So it's been really hard, but I also know it's very important. And so I'm okay if it's a little bumpy for a minute, to know that I come out the other end understanding like what I need to do. And so like going forward with 2 videos a week, a way that I'm doing this in my head is that one of those videos is going to be my normal videos, tutorials, or, you know, how-tos or helpful informational videos. The other one's going to be more of a vlog style video of behind the scenes of my business, not really of my life, but of my business. Mm-hmm. And I think that's going to help me like learn to film, you know, in a more community building way, because that is just not a natural thing for me. And anytime I try and do it, I mess it up. I took my vlog camera with me the other day because I was like, oh, this will be a great day to vlog, because I had a YouTube studio here. I turned it into a retail store because it was too loud to be my studio, because where it was, you know. turned it into a retail store, and I'm selling it like tomorrow. Tomorrow is our official sale date of the business. Oh yeah. And I did all this in like 6 months or 60 days. Yeah.
Wow.
But the thing is, I had to go run all these errands for this sale of this business. Plus my husband's quitting his job. And on that same day, I ran a couple of errands for him. So like getting him a new cell phone because his cell phone's been company paid, and like all of this stuff. And I'm like, this is such good things to show off behind the scenes of. And then I got busy and forgot to turn on the camera. So like, it's not natural to me, but I also know that it's the direction I need to get better at. It's the thing I need to get better at to get me where I'd like to be on the platform. And so that's how I'm kind of reconciling it in my mind, is like being able to do both. And I think eventually I will start to film in a way where I feel like I am doing both in one video.
Yeah. Yeah. That is a challenge to it. This is somewhat unrelated to it, but kind of related. It's just the idea of like knowing what to film and not film. Cause I think there are vloggers out there and YouTubers out there who like, they will literally film like every single moment of their life. Yeah. Like, it's like, you ever watch Truman Show?
Right.
With Jim Carrey.
Yes.
It's like that. Or like Ed TV with Matthew McConaughey back in like the late 90s. Like, like reality television style. And that's something I've asked other YouTubers who, kind of do a similar kind of format. Is like, how do you decide what to share and what not to share? Because, there's certain elements, I imagine, of your life that you want to keep private. Like, you don't want everybody to know every single detail about you.
Yeah. And for me, it's like I have hard stops on like, this is mom time and family time, and this is like work time. And so if I'm carrying around a camera all the time, then I don't have that clear line. And so that's been really hard for me too, is like, where is that line and like, what do I do? But I think it's different for everybody. And I think everybody has a different comfort level on what they share and how often they're filming and like how much they're filming. And it's just really finding yours, And so that's why I'm like, I'm struggling with that. So I'm going to try a different strategy and see if I can fix it, and figure it out.
Right. Well, to kind of shift gears here, Jessica, like, as far as where you are right now in your creator journey, aside from obviously, making the adjustments and adaptations in the direction of content that you're creating, what would you say are like the biggest challenges that you face right now as far as where you're at?
Yeah. The biggest challenge hands down has been breaking myself of old habits and trying to change things there for sure. But secondarily to that, it's really finding the people who want the things that I'm talking about, and knowing how to do that and how to get in front of them and, really understanding like what they need from me and then what's going to take them from YouTube into the rest of the things I have to offer them, because YouTube is just the top level. Like once they find me on YouTube, I need them to get on my email list, or I need them to buy a course, or I need them to come into my Instagram to learn more and to really be able to help them in the capacity that I want to help them. And so really just, streamlining what that looks like and like where those people are and how I need, like what the topics are I need to talk about to really attract them into what I need. But also, I feel like this is something that every creator struggles with, and I feel like I can't not talk about it. And that is like the comparison of yourself and other creators, and especially in your own niche or, with your own ideal viewer. And it's just, that's always a struggle. Always. It's always like, they're doing it better than me. They're doing this, like whatever. And trying to navigate that as just a human and not let that take over your life, you know? But I mean, honestly, the biggest struggle hands down is figuring out how to really, shift my content from talking head 5 tips about X, Y, or Z to community building, but also helpful tutorials. So that's been my biggest struggle right now, honestly.
Yeah, no, I hear you. And then even with the comparison thing, like it's always a trap, even when logically, like, don't do this, right? Like, yes. We always compare upward, right? Like, you're never comparing yourself to like somebody below 100,000 subscribers. You're like comparing yourself to somebody who's where you want to be. And you're thinking to yourself, oh my gosh, why am I not there yet. I mean, I feel like I struggle with that all the time, even with
Or
this
like
podcast.
for me, I mean, so it took me however many years, 4 years to hit 100,000 subscribers.
Yeah.
And that's quick, but it's also a long time, right? Depending on what you look at as a comparison.
Because exactly. Because there are other people who like got to 100,000 subscribers in a year or like less, or like a few months, right? Like
exactly.
That's the hard part.
And there's peers in my industry who started after me and have, were below me and have passed me now. And now the really cool part about that is I don't really compare myself to them or have any kind of issues with that because I know why. It's because they did this from the beginning. They did the community building piece from the beginning. Every one of them. I could point you to every one of them. Or I had my big growth in the beginning. So I had some videos that really exploded, when I had a really small channel that took me from, a very small channel to maybe like 50,000 subscribers. And since then, my growth has been very predictable, but very, pragmatic. It's not been like I have this one video or this group of videos that just explodes my growth. Mm-hmm. But there's other people who will get like, 50 or 60,000 subscribers and then they have this massive explosion. So they fly past me, right? It's like they hit the turbo way after I did and we were all going after the same finish line, But the cool part is I don't necessarily compare myself or get down on myself about that. But I also, I see it. I'm not blind, like I see that it's happening. And I understand that like there's something I need to do to fix that, to, be able to feel like I am doing what I need to be doing,
Yeah, exactly. Well, Jessica, we've talked about so much in this hour. And honestly, like I always have like a list of questions that I prepare. And I know that it's always going to go off the rails at times and go in different directions just based on where the conversation is going. And so there's so many other things that I would, maybe at some point we'll have to do a round 2 and just touch base with you on.
Sure.
But as we close this out, is there anything that, we didn't get to discuss or that I didn't ask you about that you would like to share with people while we wrap up?
Not really. If you're wanting to get started on YouTube, the only thing probably that comes to mind is it's not too late. It's not too late. I think I see that all the time. It's like, well, it's too late. Everybody in my industry is already there, like blah, blah, blah. And it's just not. YouTube is still an underutilized thing. And if you can be consistent, you will win the game. Like that's because people start a YouTube channel and then a month in they give up, or they give up for 6 weeks and then they start again, or they're 6 months in and they do that, or whatever. So if you can be consistent and you want to grow on YouTube, you can still do that. But that would be the only thing I can think of.
Gotcha. Well, Jessica, this was awesome to chat with you. I learned a lot. Like, again, I'm probably going to, steal a lot of your ideas.
Go ahead. I like
how we're doing things here with this podcast and over at Video Husky. But as we wrap up here, just let everybody know where they can find you, your website, YouTube channel, all the social media links, whatnot. Feel free to share them now.
Yeah. So the best place to connect with me is on Instagram, to connect with me directly through DMs. And it's just my name, Jessica Stansberry, there on Instagram. Of course, my YouTube channel. And it's also just my name, Jessica Stansberry. And my website is heyjessica.com. So you can find me in all the places. I promise. Just Google me. You'll find me. I have enough content out there to like direct you in the right way.
Awesome. Well, we'll also include all of that in our show notes for this particular episode. But Jessica, thank you so much for chatting with me and being so open, being like an open book. It's always awesome to chat with people like yourself who I can feel your personality bleeding over my monitor, so this was great to chat with you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I loved every minute of it. You're a great interviewer. Some people are not great interviewers. You're a great interviewer.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. That's a nice little uplifting thing to my ego.
Good.
Thank you again to Jessica Stansberry for joining me on this episode of the Videocraft Show presented by Video Husky. Want to thank all of you for tuning in to this particular episode. And as we wrap things up here, also want to give a shout out, of course, to my team for helping me to produce this particular episode and all the episodes here on the Videocraft Show. My producer, Nikki Vicente, editor Ingrid Saraiba, as well as Paulo Lopez on graphics. They are the team that makes all of this happen and makes all of these cool effects. I don't know what I'm doing with my hands here. I'm doing these things because I think Ingrid is gonna do something with it. She's gonna add some sort of effect here. But if you would like your videos to be edited and look just like this, then all you have to do is visit videohusky.com to learn more. And before we wrap up, I want to remind y'all, if you can, make sure to hit the like button, smash it. That's what some of these YouTubers like to say. Smash the like button if you enjoyed this particular episode. And if you enjoy me going off the rails with this outro and just doing all kinds of different things when it comes to speaking. But yeah, let's go ahead and wrap up this particular episode. Like the video if you are watching on YouTube, and if you are new to the podcast and haven't subscribed already, you can listen to us wherever it is that you get your podcasts, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and more. That's going to do it for this edition of the Videocraft Show presented by Video Husky. We will see you next week. Goodbye.